Rest doesn't always mean do nothing. Rest sometimes is doing what your body needs, whether that's meditatively under the water, whether that's challenging your brain in a different way, whether that's recuperating just by, as I mentioned earlier, kind of changing the cognitive loop that we're used to. Actually, that can really enhance the way we feel inside our bodies. And it just, again, takes our mind off that daily grind, which often social media will tell us is what we always need to be doing. Seneca said that rest is not the opposite of work, it's part of it. Harry, good to see you, buddy. On the other side of the world, in Bali, you've been up to a lot of adventurous challenges. I've been watching and following you on Instagram. So I thought today, because you're in Bali and you've been exploring the world of freediving and other fantastic adventures, I saw your dive where you were playing with or looking at giant turtles and going deep and scuba diving under wrecks and all sorts. I thought maybe today we could talk about the power of rest, the benefits of travel, how adventure can really disrupt like the way that our cognitive mind works, and how it can really reduce stress and all these kind of things. So, and also it gives me a guilty reason for saying, tell me about your holiday in a way that I listened to respond to.
It's interesting, actually, because you talk about rest there, and I've literally just come from the hospital because, as I mentioned last time, there was something wrong with my foot, I think. I can't remember. I think I'd got an MRI done when I spoke to you, and it's like a fracture. Anyway, I hadn't seen a consultant until today, and they had like a thing that they say called PRIME, which is P for protection, but R stands for rest. And I'm thinking, I'm not really resting the foot so much here, except for the one thing, which is the one thing I don't really like about Bali, which is you can't really walk anywhere. Everything is with scooters. So I've literally just been on a scooter, which is resting my foot, but navigating the streets back from half an hour from the hospital, trying to get some food in and then come home and do this. And it's pretty crazy. But the main thing is for my foot is to rest. And interestingly, because of the fact that my foot is a little bit of fractured with some swelling, inflammation, a bit of torn ligament, it means that I'm not able to do things I want to do. Like I was riding down the beach the other day, I saw people playing beach volleyball, and I'm like, oh, I'd love to be able to play beach volleyball. I'm currently looking at all these people surfing, thinking, can I do the surfing? I might give that a go. But the things I couldn't do meant I could do other things. So I got back into scuba diving, which I hadn't done for about 2.5 years. And so I did a few dives, including one of the ones that you saw a picture of, which was a shipwreck. The USAT, United States Army Transport Liberty, which got sunk in the Second World War, I think, and was brought up on shore. And then an earthquake, a volcano eruption that happened in Bali pushed it from the shore back into the water. So it's actually quite close to the shore. You just walk in and do some dives there. So that was good. But the one that I wanted to talk to you about was freediving.
I was about to say, before you jump into it, like for those listening, that was the world's smallest violin, really, talking about, I wish I could volleyball, wish I could walk. So for the last 2 weeks, I've been free diving in the shores of Bali, looking at giant turtles and shipwrecks. Yeah, I feel for you, Harry. It must be tricky in all that sunny weather, being out in the water, free diving in such beautiful surroundings. Like, I fully understand the challenge that must have been not being able to join in with the beach volleyball. Obviously, I'm jesting. But
yeah, it is challenging because, I know you jest, but it is challenging because it gets to the point, and, I guess this comes to a bit of age as well, where I'm thinking, I'm doing less than I want to do. And I never wanted to be in that position of not, and obviously this is temporary, but I still think like, sometimes as you get older with each injury, sometimes you kind of ease back a little bit more. And then I'm like, whereas, years ago, I'd be like just jumping around, jumping a rock. Even there was a waterfall I went to, and I was thinking, back in the day, I would have climbed up a little bit, but this time I was like, no, I'm not going to do any of that. I had a friend who broke his ankle once climbing up a waterfall, and he's like really athletic gymnastic guy. And I was like, it's not worth it for like 2 seconds of like glory to then have like 6 weeks.
I get it. Injury. I've been injured since October with different strains. I think a lot of it comes down to age and change. And what's interesting is you said you can't walk and you can't do these things. And for a lot of us who can't do things, sometimes we feel guilty about resting anyway. Sometimes it's good for us, our body's way of saying, actually do a little bit less, just relax. The holiday is all about sometimes relaxing to rejuvenate. But of course, everyone's the idea of a good holiday is different. For you and for me, probably, we like a bit of adventure. We like movement because that actually helps rejuvenate us. And some of the research I was looking in prior to the show was talking about how changing environments can really break those cognitive loops that we associate with day by day. Travel interrupts stress patterns. When we reset, we're exposed to new sights, new sounds, new cultures. And for you, well, you've been exposed to quite a lot under the water with your freediving. So tell me a little bit more about that. Hopefully those adventures and that nature has been reducing your own cortisol levels.
Well,
Biggest must.
I have to say, so I never contemplated freediving. So for those listening, like maybe my mum, who's got no idea what I'm talking about, is scuba diving is where you have some breathing apparatus, you swim underwater, which most people are familiar with scuba diving. Freediving is where you don't have any apparatus except for maybe a wetsuit and weights. You hold your breath and then you kind of dive into the ocean and there's a whole competition around it. And I think people go to depths of, 120 meters, maybe even deeper. And in some, there's different categories. It was never on my radar to even do. And then a friend of mine, she was like, oh, I'm thinking about doing freediving in this place. And then it cropped up and I thought, oh, maybe I'll do that. And then she happened to be on the same island that I was at the same time. And so we both decided to do the course. She wasn't going to do it. I was originally going to do it by myself. She wanted to do it somewhere else. And we both did it because I thought, you know what, it's going to use up 2 days of my time and I'm not going to be wanting to explore too much anyway because I needed to rest. And so we did a 2-day level 1 course. And some of the things that I thought were really applicable to our show and Mindful Paths, and something that hit me, I'm going to just put my glasses on so I can read my notes here. This thing I thought was really interesting. So the main thing, right, is they don't actually teach any specific breathing. You might do some breathing exercises on land before you go in and some stretching and all of that. And we did the first half of the day's theory and just understanding your mammalian dive response or reflex. And so how the body adapts to change in those pressure environments where your blood, the first thing is that your heartbeat starts to slow down. The second thing that might happen at certain depths, I think, is your veins or vasoconstriction. So all the arteries and veins get narrower. But then I think, I can't remember the third thing he was talking about that happens. But the other one was your spleen, like for proper freedivers and even amateurs as well, their spleen will start to release more red blood cells. So your body adapts massively to the pressure. And what I thought was really interesting is the most important thing is not to use up the air. And so you take an inhale, but you basically breathe normally. You try and relax as much as possible. And then you take maybe a couple of kind of maybe slightly breaths. But then the last one, you just take a full inhale. So like breathing into the belly, into the chest, into the back, everything. You hold your breath and then you kind of just go for it. Now, the more times you dive, the further you'll be able to get because your mammalian dive response starts to activate. But what I thought was quite interesting is that the most important thing is that you are chilled and relaxed because any stress causes you to use up oxygen. And one of the things I thought was quite interesting and super applicable to meditation and mindfulness and all this is he was saying that when you're diving down, so we tend to, at the beginning at least, you do it with a rope. So you're pulling yourself down the rope. And I'm not sure if you saw the video I posted on Instagram or not, but you're pulling yourself down.
I think, mate. You're following, yeah.
Like so you pull the thing down. But he said, right, and they put the end of the rope and there's a little yellow ball at the end of the rope. And, they'll put it down to say, I think 8 meters and then 10 meters or whatever. But don't look towards the yellow thing, but also don't look down. And you just look straight ahead. And the reason is because if you put your neck in a position, you're creating tension in your neck, and tension is stress, and stress is using up oxygen and stuff. But what I thought was really interesting is, and he said this, I think, it's like, don't look to the future or to the past. You look right into the now. And I thought that was so applicable because that's what all the meditation is all about. The mindfulness is all about present moment awareness. And I found the freediving experience to be so meditative, because you have to just be relaxed. you have to, I mean, they do give you some techniques, which I didn't actually need to use in the end, like where you have a happy place. So you think of a positive memory before you dive. And then when you start to struggle, you go to that memory, or you do a body scan. So you scan for areas of tension, or you just scan your body. But you have to really be present, but also really relaxed and able to cope with what might be going in your head and just releasing it and relaxing it. So I thought that was really interesting. And when you're out of the present, when you're looking forward or back, that's when it becomes harder. And it's also about not letting the ego take control, because there was a couple of times where I think he dropped it to like, say, 15 meters for me on my first day at one point. And he told me, which I didn't really want him to tell me, because then suddenly I'm like, oh, I got to 11 last time. And then I was like, wanted to get to a point, and then my air, I was starting to feel an urge to breathe, but I wasn't getting convulsions. So what normally happens is you might get the urge to breathe, which is when they tell you to come up, but you can also get stomach convulsions. And then once you get past that, you actually still have loads more time. And a lot of the freediving is psychological. It's all about mindset. It's all about knowing what the body's doing and knowing that when those things happen, that you're not going to die. But anyway, I look ahead, which I'm not supposed to do, and you see the yellow ball and you're like, I can probably just make it. And then I'm like, no, I have to be mindful and with awareness, as we talk about, check myself and say, that's the ego wanting to get to that point on this dive. And I just turn back and I go back up. And then you get there on the second one because your mammalian dive responses has reactivated. And eventually on the second day, I actually got to 20 meters. And I found it so calming because you can't see much, to be fair, because there's not like coral. You're not looking at anything like that. You're just diving down, and the guy dives down with you, and he was doing some videos and stuff. But I just found it like the most meditative experience. I really, really recommend you do it, and then your body adapts as well, so you can cope with stress. It's like all the breathing stuff that we talk about.
Sounds great. The videos,
I loved
great.
it.
But interestingly, what you were talking about, obviously, while you've been away, as you know, I've been reading Marcus Aurelius's books on Stoicism, and he talks about, you may have come across this in your own research, but he talks quite heavily about something he calls strategic disengagement. I think that seems to be quite relevant to what you were doing, like stepping back to see more clearly. Like you just want to look straight forward. Don't get disengaged or engaged in other things that are going to take your focus and they potentially could impact your stress levels. We have to, in the way that he talks about it, and to sort of utilizing it in the way that you've been using it, it's that strategic disengagement from everything around you and being totally focused and aware on the task at hand. And I think that those two things link quite closely. What I thought was really nice, though, watching you away, is there's a real pressure in society generally that we glorify a grind culture, that we working hard and never resting is so cool, and get all these. I've been watching your Instagram. I'm not really on Instagram. I've been on it recently because I've been following you while you've been in Bali. So obviously, while I'm in there, I then get inundated with everything else. And a lot of it on there is you need to work this, that, and the other, and do all this, and never take a rest. And that's why I've got this Ferrari and this, that, and the other. But I think a lot of this stuff on social media and elsewhere are the kind of things that do start to make us feel guilty when we rest. It's almost become the paradox of rest is we want to rest, but we're afraid to do it because then we're not being truly productive. And I think watching you out there has highlighted, hopefully, to people that have followed you, and if they haven't, go look at the videos, that actually rest doesn't always mean do nothing. Rest sometimes is doing what your body needs, whether that's meditatively under the water, whether that's challenging your brain in a different way, whether that's recuperating just by, as I mentioned earlier, kind of changing the cognitive loop that we're used to. Actually, that can really enhance the way we feel inside our bodies. And it just, again, takes our mind off that daily grind, which often social media will tell us is what we always need to be doing. And going back to the Stoicism piece, Seneca said that rest is not the opposite of work, it's part of it. I think that's also, we've got to make sure that we prioritize these things. I can't say I'm not saying you're jealous that you've just taken 6 weeks to go to Bali, though.
Well, rest is basically taking time away from the thing that you're doing. So you have active rest, and I'm not one for like lying on a beach much unless, I've got company maybe, but when I'm by myself, I tend not to. But yeah, I've taken 6 weeks. I'm actually probably going to take another 4 because, interestingly enough, like some work that I do, I've said no to a lot of work, which is, this is, been quite a financial commitment to come here, because I've said 2 months I've said no to work that I physically have to be there for. And most of that work is going to dry up at the moment. And so I'm only going to now come back for a piece of work that I've already got booked in March. And I'm thinking I might just, so I'm not extending Bali, but probably go to Thailand for a couple of weeks, the last 2 weeks. Because I'm like, you know what, 10 weeks away will be like the longest I've ever been away, other than 25 years ago when I was traveling. So I thought that might be quite a nice milestone to hit. And already 6 weeks is the longest I've been away, to be fair. But I think after what happened, like for my family and or your family, I was just like, it's not like money can come and go. And talking about what your grind culture that you were talking about before, is I always say to people, like, you have to think like, there's an exercise I do when I do this with people, but I'm like, I'm effectively asking the question, for what purpose? For what purpose? For what purpose? And I think we've talked about this on the show before. So it's like, okay, you want to work hard. Okay, for what purpose? To get money. For what purpose? To have freedom, to have success, to have this. For what purpose? And ultimately, they usually end up at like something like to be happy, right? And I'm like, well, do that now. Like, you don't need all those things to get you to that point. And
it's similar to the idea of, when I do this, then I'll be good enough. When I do that course, then I'll be good enough. When I read that book, then I'll be good enough. Actually good enough.
Well, actually, interestingly, I was having a conversation with a girl in the hostel. So I'm back in the hostel, and she's doing her yoga teacher training next week in Ubud. But she was talking about how she doesn't feel that she's going to teach after that, because she's not going to be ready, and she needs more training and more years of practice. I'm like, no, you don't. You just, to be a good teacher, you need to teach a lot, not do courses.
Absolutely right.
A lot.
You need to do the thing that you want to do, which is teach, and you'll learn with experience.
Otherwise it's always the next thing and the next thing and the next thing to make you feel qualified.
Well, what's quite relevant to that, both with the yoga, but more again, bringing it back to your freediving, is when we're stressed, we typically think, the first thing we'll say is, I need a holiday. We'll hear that all the time. It's a cliche. I need a holiday. I need a break. I'm getting burnt out. But we're often trying to think our way out of stress. And there's lots of tools, Headspace and apps and things where we can meditate and we can sit with our own thoughts. But I think that's not always the only answer. Like, we don't just have to think our way out of stress. We can move our way out of it as well. And whether that's yoga or freediving, but as you said, and I was jesting with you earlier, but the ability to move the body is one of the best ways we can reduce our stress levels. But I do think with everything that we see in social media and beyond, that people are almost starting to believe now that the only way we can reduce our stress is either by doing nothing, and therefore we have to think our way out of it, or distract our way out of it by reading a book or doing whatever. But actually, I'm not saying those things can't work, because obviously there's huge medical and scientific evidence that suggests silent meditation does work. But it's not the only way. Like, we can also move our way out of stress. And that's certainly the way that I would handle it. And you with the freediving, the serenity, it sounds like, and it sort of looks like in your videos, is amazing under the water, where everything kind of slows down. You're moving your body. And actually, you're combining a little bit of that meditative thinking piece anyway, but in a slightly different way. But I would urge anyone who's feeling really burnt out and stressed at the minute, like, there's more than one way to skin a cat, if you like. You can move your way out of it. You can combine it with thought processes and meditation, and there's a host of different things we can do.
The only thing I would add to that would be that, so when it comes to freediving, you definitely can't really do it if you're stressed. And the reason is because you're not going to be able to do the thing. And so actually, point of example, a couple of days ago, I decided to do a coaching session and pay one-on-one freediving in a place I was at, different from where I learned. We went out there, they dropped the line to, I think, 15 meters, but it was really rough, the water, and the visibility was terrible. We actually had a line, I was attached to the line, because she was like, the instructor was like, definitely use an attachment here, because she wouldn't be able to see past the meter. But I was feeling a bit anxious for whatever reason. I don't know. I think
I'd feel pretty anxious, mate. If I was doing my first free dive and I was weighted down, I think that's normal.
It's not my free one. That was my third day. But what it was is that the waves were making me feel like really a bit seasick, actually. And then with everything else, and I don't know, a few things were going on in my mind. So I went down. I kind of struggled with the equalization, because the equalization is different from when you do equalization when you're scuba diving, because your body's inverted, and so your equalization has to come from kind of the mouth, and it has to be very frequent, or not from the stomach, because you can't push the air down that way. Anyway, so I was having a bit of problem with equalization, which I haven't had before, and a few other things. So I kind of, again, let the ego not take over, and I came up and then I went down a couple of times. But in the end, I decided to call it. So I was like, actually, let's not do this, because I'm not feeling it. And I was anxious and stressed. Now, interestingly, what we did then do is a pool session. So we had a 25-meter pool, and then she was teaching me how they do the swimming underwater to, hold your breath. And actually, that was more interesting. And like, you can do that when you're a little bit stressed, because obviously you're in shallow water. You can still have those blackouts, I guess, maybe if you hold your breath too long. But you are moving the body there. And that was much calmer, because obviously it was a swimming pool. I was more relaxed, and ended up doing like about 40 meters, I think, underwater, which was quite nice with fins. Yeah, it's pretty good. I could have probably gone to 50, but again, I was like, you know what? The main important thing when you do free diving of any sort, and a pool as well, you shouldn't ever do it with anyone unless there's someone like walking with you. Is you've got to keep safety top of mind. And we were with someone the other day, and he was diving, and he was struggling because he was struggling either with equalization or something, but he was under for a long time, and you could see him. He was like trying to push that extra meter. And the guy was like, look, you were under there for like a minute 45, and he only got to like 8 meters or something like that. It wasn't very deep, but he struggled to, and he was battling. And it just doesn't work when you battle. You just have to release, let go, and then things glide. I really I think you would love it. I really recommend doing it. I've been talking to lots of people about it, because I find it
I'm not a natural in the water, as you may or may know. Or not know the stories of me and my scuba diving adventures. Yeah. I ran out of air, nearly got stung in the face by a stonefish from like point
I'm not
blank
sure if
range.
I know that, but you have told me because of your mum's premonition thing.
Sure. She's a dream that I drowned in water, which probably doesn't help me. It was a recurring dream that she had for the first 18 years of my life. Yeah, not a great subconscious story that's in the back of my mind somewhere when I'm in water. But no more to the point. I did my scuba diving paddy in Zanzibar. I qualified, and then straight away, like the first dive, I ran out of air underneath because I was flapping around. I couldn't get my weights right. Obviously used up too much. Assumed it was a faulty equipment. So I was very calm under the water, telling the instructor, who was about 10, 50 meters away, that the gauge isn't working. And as I was telling him this under the water with my sign language, the air just literally stopped and cut out, and I had to go and share his air. It had to stop everyone else's dive. Everyone had to come to the surface as he got me out of the water. Very embarrassing. I was fine, but it was embarrassing. And then the second day, we went for another dive, and the instructor was like, going up, we were taking photos, we had underwater cameras. And he was like, take a look at this picture. This is amazing. And there's like an opening in a rock. And I got closer and closer. Couldn't see what it was. Little fish there and whatever. I was like, what's he looking at? And I got really, really close. Suddenly he was like, no, get out of the way. And like a magic eye, but you can't see what you're seeing, and then suddenly you can see it. Like the spindles of a stonefish, which aren't hugely dangerous, but they can cause cardiac arrest if they hit you in the wrong spot. It was I've got a photo of it, about a centimeter away from the middle of my face. And I'm staring at this thing, and I suddenly see the spindles, and I suddenly see this huge fish. I mean, I've got an amazing photo because there's a point blank range of this thing. But it was jokes, I almost stung myself in the middle of the face with a stonefish spindle. So, yeah, I had a bit of a reputation for being the one no one wanted to go diving with. And the third dive, I'll just finish here, which wasn't me, but my wife came with me. She did a paddy years before in Mexico. We went for a dive, and again with the same group. Must have loved us. And my wife gets terribly seasick. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen a diver be sick under the water, but it was really tidal. We went out, and she vomited while scuba diving. So everyone was kind of navigating this swirling vomit under the water. So the first 2 days I'd ruined, or had these incidents. Third day she comes with me and pukes under the water because she's too seasick while scuba diving. So she's much more of a water baby than me.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, when I did my scuba diving just recently, the first 3 dives, first time ever, the guy was making me share his air, because he was like, he does the checks and stuff, and I was down to like 70, and other people were still over 100. So I was using up air. So he gave me his second regulator for like 5 minutes, and then we carried on swimming. We didn't come up, but like I was having to hold on to him or whatever. He was holding on to me, and then he gave me my own air back. So 3 dives. I've never had that before. Normally, I think when you kind of running out, they tend to take you higher and higher, and then you end up going up. But I guess he didn't want to spoil it for the others. So I felt a bit gutted.
Mine fully ran out under the water. It was an interesting
How can it
experience.
run out? Were you not checking? You weren't checking your air?
No, no one else. I thought it was all right. And I just obviously was using, my weights were wrong and I couldn't get myself level in the water. I was also using a lot more to keep myself stable and more than I realised. And it was like, this doesn't look right. And I just thought it was faulty as I was letting him know. And as I was telling him, I lost it. And they'll put the old thing up and let's pull everyone out of the water. It was a bit embarrassing. I tell you what was interesting though, I like my parables. And I think I've used this one before. I'm using the example of the one you were just talking about a moment ago, where you can't be stressed if you're freediving. It reminded me of the archer and the Zen master parable, where I won't go into the whole story again because I've talked about it on a previous episode. But in that particular instance, there's a young, cocky archer who goes in and challenges everyone to an archery competition and always hits the bullseye under those conditions. And he challenges his Zen master, who takes him up a mountain on a really long walk. You'll remember this, I've told it before. And tells him to hit the tree, stand on this really unstable bridge between a massive canyon. And he says, right, now hit the tree at the end of the bridge. And of course he fails. And the Zen master says that you have great skill with the bow, but little skill with the mind that lets loose the shot. Because the idea being there is, and thinking about the freediving, is when you're mentally exhausted, like all of his energy was being on staying stable on this scary bridge across a huge canyon, that actually he was no longer the great archer he set out to be because he couldn't control the mind enough to hit the shot. And I think that's kind of interesting in the way that you talk about the freediving. Like if you've got all this stress, you're not going to be able to hold that breath. You could be the best. I can hold my breath amazingly in this environment. Actually, I get out there, I'm anxious about the water, I'm anxious about everything else. Suddenly it gets a lot more harder. So I think if you're mentally exhausted, we know that our skills and decision making and things like that start to suffer. So that was
absolutely.
a kind of a relevant example of how it can impact.
It totally is. By the way, your camera's gone off. I wanted to say that. I don't know. Yeah. Oh, there you go. It's back. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Because like you can be a really good, free diver, but then when the pressure hits, or if you can't bring yourself into that relaxation stage, you're not going to perform because you do need to ultimately be able to hold your breath and use up less air into your oxygen into your muscles and all this other stuff. So like the instructor was saying, because I was really surprised because he wasn't doing there's no special breathing technique. You don't want to hyperventilate. You don't want to do any of that. He said, no, you just breathe normally. And then the last breath is just, you take a little bit more in and you hold the breath on the inhale, which I'm not used to because when I do my Wim Hof exercises, you hold it on the exhale, plus it's a hyperventilating exercise, so it's slightly different. But the Wim Hof stuff has taught me that I can hold my breath longer than I thought, because I used to think I can't do more than about 30 seconds, 40 seconds. And with Wim Hof in the past, I haven't done it for years now, this length of time, but I've done up to 4 minutes. But I can certainly do 2.5, 3 minutes. In the pool, I think I did 2.5 minutes. They do a static apnea in the pool. And they have all the safety protocols in there as well. So you kind of hold on to someone's arm, they'll squeeze you. You have to squeeze back like every few seconds to say that you're still away. But it was interesting doing that. And then also about not panicking when things go wrong. Not go wrong, but like you could get like a blackout, a shallow water blackout. And usually that happens in the last 10 meters because of the way the pressurization is. So you wouldn't black out normally, like when you're at the bottom. It's normally when you're coming up. And so we learned how to kind of be a safety diver. You have to like be under the water at 5 meters holding your breath for them to come up, and then they simulate them blacking out, and you grab them and do a recovery breath, and then you not a recovery breath, you take them up to the surface, and you don't actually usually need to do much. You just need to tap them on the face where their sensors are, blow on them, and then call their name, and normally they'll come to. Or you do a quick recovery breath, not a CPR, just a recovery breath just to kind of stimulate them. But all of these things is about knowing A, how your body adapts to the pressure, and B, what to do in an emergency that actually calms the mind.
How are you from an emotional standpoint? That you had a chance to be at one with yourself, your breathing.
Well,
obviously, you've been through a lot of trauma, losing your dad and different things. And did you find it cathartic? Did you find it emotional?
I wrote this, and I didn't say it before. So I wrote some notes, which I talked about before, like the head up, not down. But what I thought I wrote here, and I was like, oh, is this what I said? And I wrote bosom of earth. And what I mean by that is like, because you're under the ocean so much, and also because you're not under the ocean with all the scuba gear, which I feel like detaches you from the nature of it, it feels like you're being wrapped by Mother Earth for me. And that's why I found it so meditative. And also because, in a way, I sometimes there were some similarities with some plant medicine experiences I've had, where you're kind of out of the body, but you're in a point where, when I've done the plant medicines, some of them, I feel like I can't breathe, because basically it's like you're dead. Like your soul has escaped and it's gone to other dimensions, and then you're breathing, but you don't know you're breathing because you're not with your body. But when you're underwater, it's similar, because you're like, oh, I can't open my mouth. I can't take it. I'm in the same, my mouth is closed. And so it just felt very, very spiritual, very spiritual. More so, way more so than, I enjoyed it way more than scuba diving, I think.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I've not done free diving. I've obviously done scuba diving, but and it is, when I'm not having those incidents, it was incredibly calming. As someone who doesn't like being in the water, particularly when you're under the water and you have a full view of it, it feels very different than when you're swimming on the surface.
I do recommend giving it a go when you next go to a place where you can do it. Do like a level 1 course. Like I said, they take you through things step by step. There are different governing bodies, so just speak to me, because apparently the one I did was not actually the best one, because like for various reasons.
Did you manage to, you mentioned the word let go earlier, or the words let go, did you manage to let go of any of the stresses that you went out with since you've been out, not necessarily to the free diving, just when you've been in Bali? Is it giving you the rest and recuperation you've wanted?
I mean, I think did I have stresses beforehand? It's certainly, from what I'm hearing, it's been so cold out in the UK, and I'm like, I think, yeah, and I really am glad that I'm away for this winter. It feels like, I don't know if I could have coped with the darkness and the cold this year. So that has definitely helped. One thing I have found quite challenging though, is I haven't been connecting with people as much as I'd like to. Now, when I was in Ubud, it was kind of easy because I met a bunch of people at the yoga places and I knew people from before that I just happened to bump into. But when I was in this is a large reason why I've come to hostels, is not because I can't afford to maybe have my own accommodation, but I just want to force the interactions. But one of the things that I found hard, and I mentioned it to a guy today at breakfast, is everyone, and myself included, when I'm at dinner and stuff, they're on their phones and they're looking down. And it's so starkly obvious from like when I used to travel back in the day, when you could connect with people so easily. Here at breakfast, people are on the phones. And I actually deliberately went today to breakfast without my phone, and everyone was on their phone.
It's so habitual now, isn't it? It's so
everyone was on their phone.
Yeah.
And I ended up chatting to this guy because he was having some pancakes, and I was like, oh, how they, and so I kind of took him out of that, and we had this whole discussion, and he was like, yeah, it's terrible, all this stuff. And ironically, today I was having dinner by myself, but I was the only one in the restaurant. And a friend of mine from Ubud is in where I am now, which is another town by the sea. And he wanted to meet up. I said, I can't, I've got a podcast, I'm running, but I'm going to this place for dinner. And he just rocks up and I'm on my phone watching the latest episode of Invincible or whatever. And so I just find the phones a real problem. Like, even I was walking down the street many times and there's all these massage places. And I was saying to the guy at breakfast today, I was like, a lot of the time I do a massage as a just impromptu, right? And they're like, oh, massage. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I can do a massage. But so many times, most of the time, these masseuses are on their phone as well. And I'm thinking, I would have probably gone for a massage. Like, I'm not like veering towards a massage, but if someone said, hey, you want a massage? I'm like, oh, I've got an hour to kill. I probably would have done it, but you're losing money by being on the phone.
It's funny because when I'm coaching clients, an executive coaching format or transformation or whatever it is, one of the questions I'll often ask them is, what's the one thing you need to put down today? Right? I'm not talking about the physical. I'm talking about the thing that holds our stress. So if you go back to the the idea that how long, and if you hold a glass of water outright, it's not heavy at all. If you hold it for a few minutes, it's not heavy. Even 10, 15 minutes, not heavy. If you hold it for an hour, it gets heavy. Hold it for a day, it gets really heavy. The longer we hold on to something that's causing us stress somewhere in the body, the more it starts to paralyze us until we put that thing down. So I'll say to a client, look, what's that thing you're holding on to that's weighing you down that you actually need to put down today to help release that stress? And actually, it applies to what you've been saying, because for a lot of individuals, actually just putting the phone down is probably the first step to just, rejuvenation, reducing stress, because so much of our stress is related to the things we read, the things we see, and the things we're waiting for, those notifications that are in our phones. And actually, if we put it down, we haven't got them in our mind's eye and we can just relax, it might be a little bit easier. And that's probably the first, from now and these days in the modern world, the first step to rest and recovery is probably not just to put those thoughts down in the psychological sense I was talking about with my clients, but actually the put down the actual physical thing.
It's tied together because that physical object is taking your thoughts away. Because, like I've mentioned before, like if I'm having a conversation with someone and there's a phone on the table, I feel I'm competing for that person's attention with the attention that the phone is going to give them. Now, it is
Simon
quite challenging.
Does a great video on this, doesn't he? As well, we've seen it,
we've seen it. Yeah, I think you shared it with me. And the thing is, I know the phone is super useful because, like, sometimes we're talking about things or you're showing the pictures or whatever with that person. But I was thinking I would like to open a hostel and just ban mobile phones. Because
probably really popular. Probably would
I think it would be.
It forces an action.
I mean, it would be and it wouldn't be, because like a lot of the time you need them when you get to the place. The first thing I'm always asking is, what's the Wi-Fi? What's the Wi-Fi? But I think like at a yoga center I go to in London, what they have is they've got, I think they call them like community tables or whatever. So there'll be like a sign on that particular table, like no technology. So if you're sitting at a table, you can't use your laptop or your phone or things like that. And I think that would be quite good to have, because people want it. The whole reason a lot of people come to hostels or do traveling is because they want to meet people, they want to connect. And I feel like, I don't think I'm alone with this, because when I've spoken to other people, they find it's the same situation. I was in the yoga barn, which is this big yoga center in Ubud, and everyone's on their phone. And you're not getting the eye contact. And ironically, you're in the phone looking for connection. Some of them might be even on
you're stimulating all the things that need to rest. That's the point. We're always on the go. I'll go back to that NFL coach. I can't remember who it was now. Again, I mentioned on a previous show, I think. It stayed with me, where he said, I deal with my athletes, I make them train at 100%. And that means that when they're on the field, 100%. When they're in the gym, 100%. But when they're resting, 100%. That's not on your phone. That's not being stimulated. That is 100% rest. I want 100% in everything that we do. If we don't do that, it's difficult. There's a saying, was it the hunter who chases two rabbits catches neither one? If we're trying to rest, but we're also on our phones, they're often contradictory to each other. So sometimes just put that phone away and focus on the rest. And then when you're on your phone, give yourself that time to focus. That as dedicated phone time. That's okay. Give yourself some allocated times to do that. But it is difficult. I'm as guilty as the next. I'm on my phone a lot, although I've got a lot better.
Look, the whole thing we talk about is awareness, and we're aware of it, and I think we're kind of bringing it back to freediving. Is you are resting so much when you go under, because you can't really be thinking about all those things. You just focus. All I'm really focusing on is relax, or I'm focusing on the feel of the water on my skin, or how calm it feels to be there. But one of the things I was going to say is, one of the things I write about in the book that I'm going to be releasing is having naps during the day. And by nap, NAP, I don't mean falling asleep. I mean non-activity period. So basically conscious rest. Actually, I think, what's his name? Andrew Huberman has now coined a little phrase called deep non-sleep rest or whatever, which is basically, he's talking about, well, yes, but he's more specifically talking about yoga nidra, which is that kind of yoga and meditation where you kind of effectively doing body scans. But what I'm talking about is, anything could be a non-activity period. It's just you're taking a rest from something that you were previously doing.
I'm watching Starting Five or Starter Five. It's about the NBA. There's a big bit in there about LeBron James, who has like multiple naps a day. He's like, no, that's when my body recovers, right? That's the time I get to recover. That's the time I get to relax. Now, he's not on his phone. He prioritizes those naps as you'd call it during the day, and it's
Yeah,
So
and there's
here's
a
a
reason
question
why
then for
he's
you.
gone 20 years, 22
Well, yeah,
years
he's
in the
39
NBA.
now in a documentary, still playing at the top of his game. Question for you and maybe for our listeners then, because you are in Bali. So if you had all the time in the world, how would you rest?
If I had all the time in the world, how would I rest? It depends on what my body needs in terms of rest. Is it a physical rest? Is it a mental rest? I think that's the big thing. Like, I can't answer that very simply, because a rest one day might be going for massage and a walk along the beach. A rest another day might be sleeping
Yeah,
and not
fair.
getting out of bed.
Well,
So
if you had all the money in the world, then where would you rest?
oh gosh, I tell you what, I've been seeing some really nice hotels, like crazy hotels across the world, like, ones into cliff faces. And
Yeah, I've seen them as well. They look amazing, don't they?
yeah.
I got an
So,
Instagram reel on Italy
yeah,
this week. It looks stunning. I was like, oh my God.
I mean, some of the places I'm like, I can't believe these places are on Earth. And I'm like, so I've actually got like an Instagram list saved. So anything I see, I'm like, travel ideas. And if I had all the money in the world, I would I would go to those. I would just spend, a week here, a week there, doing all these things. But yeah, I'd need to do activities as well, because that's also part of resting, is being active. It's just a rest from, rest your body from sitting down. So listeners, you spend all day, not all listeners, but a lot of people listening to this show might spend all day sitting in their chairs on a computer. So a rest in that case is actually going for an hour-long walk. That's a rest, because it's a rest from that position. So rest can be so many different things. What about you? I mean, you're not one to rest.
I wouldn't, hard not to argue against some of those Instagrammable places. I've got a similar saved file on my phone, or I tend to share them with my wife. And there are some places on our hit list on there for sure. I've never really done a kind of Maldives type holiday, and some of these destinations look pretty cool. So I think if I had all the money in the world, I probably would go to one of these exclusive venues. Although saying that, I did go to Kalymnios Island last year, which was pretty spectacular. And I would definitely do that again. For me, though, with all the time in any location, I wouldn't want to be on my own. As you know, I like my family around me, so my wife and my kids, somewhere chill. You know what? If it was a non-optional thing where you couldn't bring your phone, I would actually favour that. But I think someone would have to kind of tell me that that's the condition. I wouldn't set that condition for myself. I always would ask someone else to take that accountability for me, or we can leave them behind. But I think it would probably serve me quite well.
Go and
I
do
would
a
say for people
meditation
listening,
then.
Yeah, probably.
Vipassana, that's 10 days, no phone, no eye contact, no conversation. You would hate it, but you would come out very.
I mean, we're looking at holidays for next year now, and we're looking at places where they are adventure type locations. I think we're looking at some surfing schools in Portugal, places like that, where we get out as a family. There are no phones if you're surfing, obviously, but get out, get in the water, do something adventurous. Nice restaurants nearby, community activity where we can all do as a family, all learning because we've never done it before. So that excites me. I'm a big fan of adventure, big or small. It just, I don't know, it changes things and makes you think differently.
It is really important. I've skipped out a lot of things that I could have seen here, and one of the reasons is because I'm like, I'd be by myself doing them, and I'm like, it's all about who you're with. Like yesterday was a bit of a sad one in the way, because I went whitewater rafting. I thought I was in this nice place called Cinnamon, which is like this.
Very jealous right now.
Old style village, right? Still classical Bali, and they've got this whitewater river, and it's actually a 2.5 hour long boat thing. And there's a couple of drops, and you would love it, and Leo would love it, Eva would love it. I think you'd all love it. But I thought, I need to do more activities, because that's how I'm going to meet people if I'm kind of staying in my own rooms and stuff, which I was then. I'm the only one on the frigging boat, like me and the instructor. That's it. No one else booked in. I'm like, see, I'm trying to do these things.
You're looking for it. It's just not happening.
I'm looking. I mean,
just
no
one is feeling for you right now with the adventures you're doing. But I do get it.
Well, look, honestly, I've had times where I thought, this is great being here, but I don't know. Like sometimes, it's nice. You have a sunset by yourself. You have a bit. But if you spend, and that's usually if you've been around people, you need that time off. But if you're by yourself a lot, and I go to all these amazing
to your
things,
model, doesn't it?
You need exactly. So the connection. So But ironically, I'm the only person in this dorm. I've got a 6-bed dorm, and I'm the only one in here tonight, which I was last night. And I actually had my best scores on my ring of the trip last night.
That's all the rings for those that haven't been following the show in the past. Otherwise, it sounds a bit dodge. Well, you'll be impressed with me. So on Sunday, for the first time in I don't know how long, I just wasn't feeling like I could be bothered to do anything. I had a full exercise regime as a plan worked out. I did absolutely nothing, and I just said to Lucy, like, it was a proper like spa day at home. I just chilled. I literally no phone actually for a bit. I lay on the bed and just chilled out with the infrared mask on. I had a proper like spa home. I felt really good for it, and I was like,
you didn't try any DIY. You didn't try any DIY.
I genuinely gave myself permission for the first time in a long time to rest without guilt, and I think we could all probably, gain something from that. I don't think we do that enough. We don't rest. We don't give ourselves the permission to rest without guilt. I think that's why often we're driven to things like our phone. So I would say, look, like, it's done wonders for me. I need to do it again. I need to schedule the next one. So I would say to everyone, like, schedule in 1 day of intentional rest. No work, just recharge, plan the day out, whatever you need to do, keep your phone away. I've done that last Sunday, and I absolutely want to book it in again. It was brilliant. I had a really, really good time. And I think the second thing to get excited about, hence the surfing school, is we're trying to plan an adventure to look forward to as a family. So I think those things give me a little bit of energy to.
Actually, it's interesting you say about that giving you energy, because one of the things which I don't do enough of is, because I'm always last minute with my holidays, but actually by planning things way in advance, months in advance, is actually hugely positive for your psyche, because you have that kind of build up and that look forward to. Whereas when you book something and you fly out the next day, you kind of miss out on that anticipation element.
I understand that. Well, so, as humans, we like to know what's coming. We like to be prepared, right?
Yeah, so that's good. That's good. And what I was going to say with the rest is, like, even God rested on 1 day, right? So why should we go 7 days a week without it? And so, definitely 1 day a week rest. That's also part of my beat model is having time off and resting. But also rest needs to be earned, because sometimes I feel like I over rest, is that I haven't done enough work to warrant the rest. So it's like, anything in life, you have to have the struggle. The reward is not, I was thinking about this the other day. The reward is not the reward. The reward is the reward after the struggle. That's what the reward is.
That's the same with anything, though, right? Like, it's the yin and the yang of life. If everything was always perfect, we wouldn't feel perfect.
Well, it's like if Edmund Hillary was helicoptered to the top of Mount Everest, the view would not be anything close to what it was having walked up it. Even though it's the same thing you're looking at, but you're looking at it as two different people. One who's done the effort and one who hasn't. And it's the same with rest, I think, is that if you just rest. I was thinking, I see sometimes these, I was watching a thing earlier today, someone who's retired in Dubai. He made his millions. He's living on, 200K a year, and he's got his budget. But I'm thinking, what are you doing day to day, like each day? Because we need purpose. I think we need a struggle. We need a struggle to really want the rest, because I think otherwise it gets a little bit monotonous.
Well, that's why so many billionaires, millionaires realize that money doesn't give them happiness. It's the giving back that does. It's the Chinese proverb that be happy for an hour, sleep, happy for a day, fish, happy for a year, inherit 1 million, happy for a lifetime, give to others. Like that's the bit that gives you that purpose, that why. I think that's really important, and we got to focus on what that why is all about to get there. But look, I've had a good chat. It's been nice, man. I'm delighted you've been whitewater rafting. Sorry to hear about your foot, but hey, look, you sounds like you do having a really good adventure out there, having a really good time. So sounds good. On the rest thing, I mentioned it before, similar to the Everest thing you just mentioned a moment ago, but Formula One car, the race is won and lost in the pits, not on the track, right? So if you don't go to the pits and change those tires, you don't finish the race. So if you're listening to this and feeling burnt out, like, you got to try and prioritize rest as much as you prioritize work.
LeBron James, you're talking about, right? Sleep is where you build the body after the gym. The gym is which destroys your body. The rest is where you build the resilience.
They work together for sure.
Yeah. So rest.
As you know, I'm a huge fan of Sydney Banks, but I think for those that are stressed, one of my favorite things he ever said is, we all think we have a reality problem, when in reality, we have a thinking problem. I love that. I think that's a nice way of sort of understanding why we need to prioritize recovery. But sometimes the things come from a different perspective when you're free diving or you look at things differently and you realize, actually, okay, maybe morality isn't quite so bad. I've just been thinking about it the wrong way around. But have a great time. I realize you're doing this from a hostel, so thanks for tuning in.
That's all right. I'll probably, God knows where I'll be in the next one we do. But I'll still be out here for probably another few weeks. So we'll see. We'll see.
Challenge for our listeners. Let's get every our listeners to schedule an intentional rest day. Plan an adventure. Give yourself permission. And if the episode has resonated with you in any way, share it with a colleague, a friend, or family member. We really want to try and improve and increase our subscriber rankings and our watch views on YouTube as well. So wherever you get this podcast, whether it's in audio or video format, please do share, please do review, please do stay with us and let us know what you think and let us know what you want us to talk about in the future. But otherwise, you'll get more stories from me and Harry, wherever we are in the world, talking about whatever we're dealing with in the world at this moment in time. So, I always enjoy our conversations, Harry. So enjoy the rest of your holiday in Bali.
Thank you. It's been nice to chat and take care, everybody. I hope this has been useful for you.